Whether it's the Vikings TV show, the Saxon Chronicles, or the Lost Kingdom, the Sons of Ragnar have really been thrust into the limelight of social media and popular culture, such as games of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where we see them and go on adventures with them. I'm Showbro6 for the History Armada, and today we're going to talk about the Sons of Ragnar, the real sons of Ragnar Lodbrock, and what I can find about them. This is a subject that I find very interesting, as I am considering a master's in Viking studies or medieval history, and I do believe in their legends, and I find them quite fascinating. So Ragnar Lodbrock, as popularized by the Vikings TV show, was a actual man in medieval European literature who has been almost deified with his exploits and his supposed legends. Ragnar is said to have been the father of 3 sons, Halfdan, Ubba, and Ivar, which there are multiple spellings for each of those names, who according to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles and other medieval sources led a Viking invasion of East Anglia in 865, known as the Great Heathen Army or the Great Heathen Invasion, and you can see the map after the invasion, lower left there in 911. They might have sought out avenging Ragnar's death. That is one plausible cause, supposedly, for which may or may not have been the murder of their father, or they may have been just claiming land as a result of the previous invasion by Ragnar. But we aren't sure if either event really happened. This sort of ambiguity is what kind of brings the thoughts to the forefront about Ragnar and his roots in European literature created after his death. In the Gesta Danorum, which was written in 1185 of the Danish historian Saxo Grammaticus, for example, Ragnar was the 9th century Danish king whose campaigns included a battle with the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne, and according to Saxo's legendary history, Ragnar was eventually captured by the Anglo-Saxon king Aella of Northumbria and thrown into a snake pit to die. This story is recounted in the later Icelandic saga and works Ragnar Saga Lothbroka and Bathar of Ragnarssonum, which accounted his exploits, his marriages, and his supposed death. Here you can see Ragnar Lothbrok meeting Kraka. The 12th century Icelandic poem Krakumal provides a romanticized description of Ragnar's death and links him to marriage with a daughter of Sigurd and Brunhild, figures from heroic literature of the ancient Teutons. The actions of Ragnar and his sons are also recounted in the Orkney Isles and the poem, I'm going to butcher this, I'm sorry, Hatallikil. Despite the lack of clarity, we do know he was a historical figure, and we know much more about his sons. So that being said, we are going to start oldest to youngest and work on the origins of Ubba first. So, Ubba, Old Norse Ubi, or Ube, died in 878, was a 9th century Viking and son of Ragnar Lodbrok, and one of the commanders of the Great Heathen Army that invaded Anglo-Saxon England in 860s. The Great Army appears to have been a coalition of war bands drawn from Scandinavia, Ireland, the Irish Sea region, and continental Europe, and there is a reason that is suspected that a proportion of the Viking forces specifically originated in Frisia, where some Viking commanders are known to have held fiefdoms on behalf of the Franks. Some sources describe Ubba as dux of the Frisian, which could have evidence that he was also associated with the Frisian benefice and the Frisian rulers. In 865, the Great Army, apparently led by Ivar the Boneless, overwintered in the kingdom of East Anglia, before invading and destroying the kingdom of Northumbria. In 869, having been bought off by the Mercians, the Vikings conquered the East Angles, and in the process killed their king Edmund, a man who was later regarded as a saint and martyr. Ubba had led this effort. While near contemporary sources do not specifically associate Ubba with the latter campaign, although it is said to have been inspired, some latter, less reliable sources do associate it with the legend of Edmund's martyrdom, and in the time, Ivar and Ubba came to regard it as a kind of archetype of the Viking invaders and opponents of Christianity. They were kind of the forefront. They were like, these are our enemies. They took Ubba and Ivar as the quintessential example of the pagan invader. And they said, look at this devil, this awful man, these kind of figures that have come come after us and our Christendom. So, Ubba is largely non-existent in the Icelandic traditions of Ragnar Lodbrock, but he is quite prevalent in the Frisian and Anglo-Saxon chronicles. After the fall of East England Kingdom, leadership of the Great Army appears to have fallen to Bagsec and Halfdan, who campaigned against the Mercians and West Saxons. In 873, the Great Army is recorded to have split. Whilst Halfdan settled his followers in Northumbria, the army under Guthrum and Eowyn struck out southwards and campaigned against the West Saxons. In the winter of 877 to 878, Guthrum launched a lightning attack deep into Wessex. There is no reason to suspect that the strike was coordinated of any kind with the Viking force in Devon, and there was a force led by Ubba's brother Ivar and Halfdan, and some later sources identify this man as Ubba himself, that was chronicled and said to have been destroyed at Skål in 878. So Ubba went on to live quite a life, and he was associated, like I said, with the legend of Edmund. And there's quite a few later on descriptions of Ubba and his efforts with the Great Army, and the Battle of Skål against the Welsh in North Devon, where it is said that he may have met his fate. But we do know that Ubba Ragnarsson did die in 878. Whether he was at that battle or not, it is unclear. And that leads us to Halfdan. Halfdan, said to have flourished, and this is the one I could find the least about. Halfdan, pictured here, was the founder of the Danish kingdom of York, otherwise known as Jorvik, supposedly created in 875 or 876, and he is the son of Ragnar Lodbrock, the most famous Viking of the 9th century. And after participating in raids on the Anglo-Saxon lands in the south, Halfdan and his followers invaded the mouth of the River Tyne in 874 and engaged in warfare with both the Picts, the Britons, and seemed to deal with both accordingly off and on. In 876, he distributed the large region of York amongst his men, and may then have left to join the Viking campaigns in Northern Ireland with his brother Ivar, but he may also have become known as the Danish king Albin, who was slain near Strangford Lough in 877. But there is yet another account that he remained in York until his death in 883. But one thing is for certain, that Halfdan was a Viking leader and can be attributed to the creation of the kingdom of York. And that brings us to Ivar. Ivar the Boneless, who actually I could find the most about other than Ubbe and his efforts in Frisia. So Ivar the Boneless, or in Old Scandinavian, Ivar in Benluasu. Ivar was spelled Ivar, I-V-A-R-R, or I-N-W-A-E-R. He is said to have died in 873 in Dublin, Ireland. He was a Viking chieftain of Danish origin, son of Ragnar, and he is best known for his exploits in the British Isles. Most notably his invasion in the company of his two brothers, the Great Heathen Army, like I said before. Ivar was said to be the youngest son of the Danish king Ragnar Lodbrock, but there is not really any details about his younger life, as there it really isn't for his brothers either. He is recorded as the companion of Olaf the White, known to history as the Danish king of Dublin and the creator of Dublin. He was known to have fought with Olaf in several battles on the island of Ireland during the 850s. Ivar and Olaf formed short-lived alliances with certain Irish rulers, including Kerbal, king of Ossory, and campaigned and plundered in the county of Meath in the early 860s. Ivar and his brothers Halfdan and Ubba invaded Britain together in the year 865, like I mentioned before, at the forefront of the Great Heathen Army, or the Great Viking Force of 865. The brothers' motivations was, like I said, supposedly to claim land that their father had fought for, and also supposedly to avenge their father's death. Well, they did get their revenge and dethrone and kill King Aella of Northumbria, and Ivar's forces landed in the kingdom of East Anglia, where they were met little resistance, and they went on to capture the capital city of York and establish the kingdom with his brother Halfdan. After installing a puppet ruler named Egbert in Northumbria, Ivar led the Vikings to Nottingham in the Kingdom of Mercia. The Mercian king Burgred called upon Wessex for assistance. King Athelred I and the future King Alfred, or otherwise known as Alfred the Great, did soon arrive and help besiege Nottingham, and the Danes had to withdraw with Ivar back to York without a fight. They remained at York for about a year, and in 869 they recrossed Mercia and returned to East Anglia, where they defeated King Edmund in battle with his brothers. Ivar apparently did not participate in the Viking campaign, ultimately unsuccessful to take Wessex from King Alfred in the 870s. Instead, it is known that he renewed his partnership with Olaf the White and entered what is now known as Scotland. Their army overran and destroyed Dumbarton, capital of the Strathclyde Kingdom, in 870, and the following year they returned triumphant to Dublin together. Ivar then became known as the King of the Northmen of all Ireland and Britain, and he ruled Strathclyde, Dublin, and part of the Isle of Man until he died in 873. The meaning of Ivar's peculiar nickname, the Boneless, is not really known for certainty. It might be known as his hereditary skeletal condition, but it could also be an inability to walk, or it might have been something to do with erectile dysfunction. It is not completely known why he is known as Ivar the Boneless, but it is for certain that he had those exploits I mentioned, one of the sons of Ragnar Lodbrock. So that was what I was able to find over a quick scan of Ragnar Lodbrock and the sons of Ragnar, the Ragnar sons, if you want to call them that, Ubba, Halfdan, and Ivar the Boneless. So, like I said, although they have been quite, deified, specularized, and popularized by both books, TV, and video games, this is what I could find about the true account of the characters that those medias are based upon. I hope you enjoyed today's weekly dose of history, and I hope you enjoyed and you learned a little something about the Ragnar sons. If you have any questions or further comments, please leave that in the comment section down below. I do read all of them. If you have any ideas what to make a video on next, go ahead and let me know. I'm always open to suggestions. I hope you enjoyed today's video and you learned a little something about the Ragnar sons. As always, I'm ShieldBro6 for the History Armada, and I'll catch y'all next time. Skål!